right, let's make sure I am live before we get started here. And here, looks like I'm live. All right, everyone, let's see. Have to have the official thumbs up from YouTube. Let's see. Okay, good, I can see my face. That's always a good sign. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Josie Warren. I am the autoimmune expert, and I am so excited about this incredibly relevant topic with our health and well-being we're talking about today. And I'm going to be sharing some of my story as well as related to this. But before we really get into what the title of today's live is going to be, I want to share with you my story for those new viewers out there or ones that are coming back after a little bit. I want you to know that if you have an autoimmune disease or if you have a chronic illness, I understand. I'm not just somebody who's learned what I teach in a book. For, probably 15 years, if not more, of my life, I was someone who had autoimmune diseases. And from age 3 on, I struggled with chronic illnesses. My first chronic illness was allergies when I was age 3. And from that, I had sinus infections, strep, food allergies, anxiety, depression. I had an eating disorder. And by the time I was 16, and it correlated with the loss of my dad, I developed my first autoimmune disease, rheumatoid arthritis. And over the next 10 years, because I wasn't aware of how to emotionally handle my life, I developed 7 more autoimmune diseases, with MS being the last one, and really that one that woke me up to realize all the food diets I was doing, all the supplements I was taking, all the medication, the specialists I was seeing, and none of it was working because I kept getting sick. So what was the missing piece here? Well, I came to where I work about 10 years ago, a new life center, and I found out the missing piece of why I wasn't healing was me. That I, in a good way, was the problem. And it was me and my unhealthy emotional state that was causing my body to be in a state of dysregulation and unable to heal. And I came here, I learned how to re-regulate my emotional state, my body re-regulated. All of my autoimmune diseases are permanently healed. It's been 10 years. I'm on no medications. I take no supplements. I see no specialists. I don't do any food diets. I am not in remission. I am fully healthy. And this is the same journey I take all my students down to full healing. And that is exactly what we talk about on this channel. You're not going to hear things about food diets or supplements or the latest biohacking. No, we need to fix us. All right. So what we're talking about today is an incredibly relevant topic to individuals with autoimmune disease, especially us women. And the title of today's topic is How Being a Perfectionist is Dangerous to Your Health. That's right. We're talking about perfectionism today. It's the elephant in the room for those of us, especially women, who have an autoimmune disease. So we're going to be talking about how does that behavioral pattern of perfectionism, how can that lead to the development of autoimmune disease? What is the connection between perfectionism and autoimmune diseases? Because there definitely is one, and we're going to go into it today. And then we're also going to go into what is the solution? How do we get out of that trap that we have lived in as women for our entire lives of being perfectionists? How do we get out of that so we can either prevent getting a severe health issue like an autoimmune disease, or if we have an autoimmune disease, how can we get our perfectionism in check so we can support ourselves with our flare-ups and not getting even more autoimmune? And please know I'm speaking about this as a woman from my own experience. As a woman who, as I shared, I used to have 8 autoimmune diseases, and I have struggled with perfectionism and known that I was a perfectionist since as young as I can remember. And I'm going to share a little bit more about my story in a moment, but I do want to share to the listeners out there that I call myself a perfectionist in recovery. And I even noticed in planning this video, in making the notes for this video, I could feel I had to catch myself being a perfectionist because I wanted to get my notes just perfect to make sure I had all the points that I wanted to say, and stressing myself out and trying to make myself reach an unattainable limit, and I had to catch myself. So I'm going to out myself. Even this video brought that up in me. So we're working off bullet points today, which is very vulnerable for me. So before we get started, we have to define perfectionism. And I love this definition. It comes from the APA, which is the American Psychological Association, the governing board of all psychiatry and psychology. And here's their definition of perfectionism. Perfectionism, the tendency to demand of others or of oneself an extremely high or even flawless level of performance in excess of what is required by the situation. It is associated with depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and other mental health problems. Just let that one sink in for a second. Again, associated with depression, anxiety, eating disorders, ladies, and other mental health problems. So like I shared, this is a topic that is a very vulnerable one for me to talk about. This video shook up a lot in me as I was planning it. These videos are good for me because they make me face things of my past that maybe I need to look at again or turn another rock over. And my perfectionist behaviors and the just complete self-destruction that has caused in my life, and especially the past, is something that as a woman I've wanted to bury my head in the sand. So my experience of being a perfectionist is something that I can't even tell you a time that I didn't have it. I would want to say I was almost born this way. That from being a kid, I remember doing art projects. They had to be perfect. If I was putting together an outfit when I was 5 years old, everything had to be color coordinated and it had to match and had to look just so. And in looking back, that perfectionist tendencies, even as a small girl, sucked all the fun and all the joy and all the life out of even just being a kid. Now, it first came out very publicly when I entered kindergarten. I was raising my hand to go to the bathroom all the time, and my teacher realized all the pressure that I was putting myself under in kindergarten. She knew it wasn't my mom doing that, and she realized that it was me. So even then, from the very first days of school, that was my tendency. And as you're talking about this, think about you. Think about your life as a woman, as a perfectionist. It turned into late nights trying to do the greatest book project that I would get all this attention for, or to get A's on all of my assignments. And as I continued through school, it became too much for me. Trying to make sure my appearance was just right. I'm someone who carried a comb in my pocket when I was little, so I was always combing my hair to make sure my hair was just straight. And I really thought I could live life that way. It was a way to control. It was a way to get attention. But I can see underneath that how self-destructive it was. And it was a way for me to avoid my life. It was a way for me to avoid the pains and the hurts and the grief and the loss that we go through from a very young age. And I would get a hyper focus on the things that didn't matter at the expense of the things that did. And, this perfectionist behavior created a lot of emotional turmoil and anxiety in me. And then over the years, starting at age 16, I started getting autoimmune diseases, my first one being rheumatoid arthritis, and so on and so forth, until not long later, I got an eating disorder when I was 18. And that fits right into perfectionism and the definition. I'm poster child for what the APA said. Mental health conditions, that was me, and autoimmune diseases. And as I was diagnosed with more autoimmune diseases, I was put on restrictive food diets, and to control the lack of control and the pain I was in from having these lifelong diseases, I used my food diets to be a perfectionist and try to find some kind of power and control over these diseases that seemed so meaningless, and I felt so small. So today we're talking about perfectionism, and in just a little bit I'm going to talk more about the problematic nature of restrictive food diets for women with autoimmune diseases who also, like myself, struggle with perfectionist behaviors. So again, perfectionist in recovery here, it's not an on and off switch, but I'm going to share with you what I practice to support myself being fully healthy. Now, first we want to talk about why working with Western and alternative medicine doctors and practitioners is problematic as women with autoimmune diseases and the problematic behavioral pattern of perfectionism. Why is it so problematic working with these doctors? So first, let's define what an autoimmune disease is. Okay, so an autoimmune disease is a condition in which your body's immune system becomes dysregulated, and it mistakenly attacks the very tissues and organs that it was designed to protect. So we want to establish here, regardless of what autoimmune disease you have out there, the problem is singular. It is your immune system is dysregulated. That's the problem. Well, that begs the question then, everyone's talking about root causes out here. No, why is the immune system dysregulated? Well, here at New Life Center, we've been doing this for 18 years. We know definitively that it is fact that the immune system dysregulates because of our emotional state. Our emotional state is what dysregulates our immune system. So even right here, can we see that if we're going to be working with Western medicine, who is going to be prescribing us prescription medication, or if we think we're, like I did, I thought I was doing better, and I was doing alternative and functional medicine as well, and you're going to do restrictive food diets, you're doing cleanses, doing blood work, supplements, that none of those things are ever going to address the real problem of why your immune system is dysregulated. They're not scratching the surface whatsoever of our emotional state. And what all of those methods are, both Western, alternative, and functional, they're symptom management. We need to get clear about this. And what is symptom management? It is treating the symptoms of your autoimmune disease, not the true root cause, which we know is the emotional state. Treating the symptoms, not the true root cause. So it's problematic already to work with Western, alternative, or functional if you have an autoimmune disease, because there's no way we can permanently heal working on symptoms for the rest of our life. That's why these doctors and specialists tell us our diseases are lifelong. I'm here at proof to say no, they're not, and they don't have to be. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. But let's go into the problematic nature of what alternative and functional medicine commonly prescribe for autoimmune diseases, and how it is a balm for us women who also have perfectionism. So if you see alternative functional medicine, like I did, you're going to be put on a food diet, whether that's the autoimmune protocol, or maybe it's low FODMAP, maybe that's gluten-free or sugar-free or paleo. Trying to think of a carnivore, even keto, right? We're going to be put on some kind of, or elimination. We did a lot of elimination diets. You're going to be put on a restrictive food diet. And what are those restrictive food diets about? They are a very incredibly limited diet that is unreasonable and unachievable for long term. I mean, I remember one time I was on one where it was about 7 foods that I could eat. I was supposed to be on it for 3 months. And an earmarker of these restrictive food diets for autoimmune diseases is that they have to be followed to a T. They have to be followed just so that they will work. And again, we know when they say work, it's just managing the symptoms. So pull back the curtain a little bit and think about what happens when I, as a woman with an autoimmune disease and I'm a perfectionist, gets put on a restrictive food diet. How do we approach said restrictive food diet? We put all of our emotional turmoil and our control and our micromanagement and our anxiety and our fear about our autoimmune disease, and we take it out on the restrictive food diet. We try to do it perfectly. And that was my experience. My restrictive food diets for my autoimmune disease became my whole life. Buying the food, prepping the food, trying to do it just right. And what happens? We can't be perfect in these because we are human. And my experience, and those of the women that I worked with, is we will eventually misstep. We will eventually have a weak moment. We will fall off the horse. And what happens? Symptoms come back. We beat ourselves up, right? Because we were trying to do it perfect. And then all of a sudden, our perfectionist tendencies are way out of control. Our symptoms for autoimmune are way out of control. But most importantly, our emotional stress continues to grow and be off the charts, which is actually keeping us stuck in chronically activated fight or flight, which is the reason why we're not healing and is the reason why we're not getting better. It is a very sick circle trap that we get put into, me thinking that I was going somewhere with these restrictive food diets when really it was just another outlet for my incredibly unhealthy behavioral pattern of perfectionism. So as you can see, it's unbelievable that they would put us women on these diets and expect that to be healthy when it causes the very emotional stress that it is what causes autoimmune diseases, right? A huge contributor, being a perfectionist. So let's talk more in depth about how does perfectionism, that behavioral pattern, how does that lead to autoimmune diseases? What is the connection here? Well, that perfectionism, that overachieving, right? That high level, trying to go above and beyond what is needed and definitely what's expected. We all know as women the high level of emotional stress inside that this creates. I mean, incredible amount of stress. And what do we do with this stress? Do we deal with it? We don't. And this is important. What we do with this emotional stress that gets created by this behavioral pattern of perfectionism, we suppress it. We suppress our emotional stress because we don't want that stress. We can't let it out. It's going to interfere on our whole perfectionist tendencies, and trying to make everything perfect, right? The stress is going to hold me back from doing that. And I know for me, even more significant, I have to suppress the emotional stress that's created from those perfectionist behaviors because I have to keep up the facade and the image that I created as a perfectionist. And we all know what that is out there, that image that we create and that we project to the world, that we have it all together, that our life is perfect, right? That it's that we have the things that we need, that almost we're those people that people envy, right? How does she look like that? How can she do all of those things? We get a lot of attention and a lot of just a lot from that. And I can't let that facade that I've created as a perfectionist crack. The people see what a crazy emotional state I had on the inside. So I just pushed it all down, not thinking about the consequences. And so what's the consequence of being a perfectionist and suppressing our emotional stress? Well, over time, we build an internal emotional pressure cooker, right? It becomes like an Instant Pot inside of us, growing and building, pressurizing and pressurizing until we almost burst. And when we burst, because what happens is we get triggered. We get set off by an unplanned life event that happens that is outside of our ability to control. It is a life event that happens that we are unable to use those well-worn perfectionist tendencies to mediate and to put back together. And that's when we blow. And we'll talk about what happens when we blow in just a moment. But let's identify what is some examples of those unplanned life events that can set us off emotionally as perfectionists. One would be a marriage or financial issue, health issues with children, death of a spouse or loved one, an unplanned pregnancy, or challenging work environments. Just a few examples, again, of what can set off that emotional pressure cooker that we live with internally as a perfectionist. As again, these life events, they can't be controlled. Now let's talk about the correlation between getting set off emotionally by unplanned life events and our physical body breaking down and developing conditions like autoimmune diseases. What's the correlation here? Well, these life events can stir us up so much emotionally, cause that pressure cooker to blow, and that can cause our fight or flight response to get activated. Now, fight or flight is a very healthy response in humans. If we're under a big physical threat, that's how it was designed. It's also designed to only be on for an hour to 2 hours. But women like ourselves who are perfectionists, it gets set off by the emotional stress of an unplanned event, and then fight or flight, unfortunately, can't tell the difference between an emotional threat and a physical threat. So this emotional threat turns it on, and then the fight or flight response reads that ongoing emotional pressure cooker from all the stress that we suppress on a day-to-day basis as perfectionists, and it thinks that we as women are under an ongoing threat. This is where the body gets dysregulated. This is where fight or flight, which is only supposed to be activated for up to 2 hours, becomes chronically activated women. Our fight or flight becomes chronically activated. And then our body gets stuck and trapped in the nervous system called the sympathetic nervous system. And we begin to live in chronically activated fight or flight in the sympathetic nervous system all of the time. And because we continue, because it's all we know how to do, is to suppress our emotional stress that we create from our unhealthy behavioral pattern of perfectionism that keeps us stuck there. And here's what happens to the physical body. This is going to lead us into how an autoimmune disease can be created. So stuck in chronically activated fight or flight in that sympathetic nervous system, our cortisol, which is our body's stress hormone, it starts to get pumped out at a continual rate. In chronically activated fight or flight, it just gets continuing to be pumped out. What does that do as women? It wreaks havoc on our female hormones. It wreaks havoc on our metabolism. So many women out there that I meet, have hormonal issues. They have weight issues. Why? It's because of the emotional stress that we're under, stuck in chronically activated fight or flight. Now, also, many of us out there, the leaky gut, right? Where is this leaky gut coming from? Well, stuck in the sympathetic nervous system in fight or flight, our digestive system becomes dysregulated. Our gut can become leaky. We get issues such as candida, food allergies, food sensitivities, SIBO, for instance. I had a lot of digestive issues. Where is that coming from? It's not really the foods, ladies. The real problem, I wish someone would have told me this, the real problem was me and my emotional state that was causing me to be stuck in chronically activated fight or flight. Now we're going to go into where's the autoimmune disease in all of this? Well, also stuck in chronically activated fight or flight, our immune system stops working properly. It becomes dysregulated. And remember, an autoimmune disease is an immune system issue, singular. So for people with autoimmune disease, what happened? That dysregulated immune system starts attacking different tissues or organs in the body, creating different autoimmune diseases. So for me, Hashimoto's was one of the autoimmune diseases I had. That dysregulated immune system was attacking my thyroid gland. I also had rheumatoid arthritis. It was attacking the lining in my joints and hands, and so on and so forth. So can we see the connection of perfectionism through a lifetime, again, creating that emotional pressure cooker that when set off by an unplanned life event can very easily lead to an autoimmune disease. We see the correlation here that, and this is important, our emotional state determines our health and well-being. Our emotional state determines our health and well-being. What I'm saying here, it's not the foods that we eat. It's not the exercises that we do. It wasn't the yoga that I went to weekly. It wasn't the meditation. It wasn't my genes. Why I got sick was because of my emotional state. And again, that emotional state creates our pressure cooker, which is that ticking time bomb, women, for us to develop severe health issues and conditions. And so for me here at a New Life Center, I work with individuals with chronic illnesses and autoimmune diseases. Very common to see a woman with a lifetime behavioral pattern of perfectionism to have an autoimmune disease. Incredibly common. Most women I work with identify as perfectionists, and some men as well. But here at a New Life Center, we also recognize the direct correlation between perfectionism and cancer in women. The direct correlation between perfectionism and cancer in women. So what's the solution? What is the solution to perfectionism? How do we minimize the risk of autoimmune disease or cancer as a woman? Or if we're out there and you already have an autoimmune disease, how do you minimize the emotional stress that creates our flare-ups and subsequent autoimmune diseases down the road if not kept in check? Well, it's something called the 80-20 principle. The 80-20 principle. And this concept is a game changer. And it is think of this, ladies, as a way of looking at life, a set of glasses that people who were perfectionists, it's not even a way that we knew existed. It's not natural to us whatsoever. It flips perfectionism upside down. And what the 80-20 principle is the idea that giving 80% in any given task and doing a good job is a job to be proud of. And that's what we should be going for. 80%, a good job, versus going that extra mile, that extra 20% to make it 100. And that extra 20% that we would give as perfectionists is not worth the time, is not worth the effort, and most importantly, is not worth the stress. That extra 20% creates an absolute clog in our life and in our time. And over time, we procrastinate. We don't achieve what we could have. We do not actually live up to our potential. And we actually achieve way less. And most importantly, that extra 20% that we would give as perfectionists creates a tremendous amount of pressure and stress that has the full capacity, as we're learning today, to completely break down our health and create autoimmune diseases and other chronic diseases. And again, focusing on that one thing, that 20%, we just get hyper-focused and let the rest of our life fall apart. I know that. I know that one well in my life. So what does 80% look like? Because you might be out there and saying 80%, that means like I'm not really trying, right? I'm not giving good enough. And that's not what this says. 80% means we as women with perfectionist behavioral patterns, we're actually doing a good job. It's a good job. And what doing 80%, going towards something with 80%, is that we're allowed to do a good job and then move on, not get hyper-focused. We get to move through our task list each day, and we accomplish so much more. So at the end of the day, if I'm going with the 80%, which is what I focused on with this video, I was trying to go for 100, and I could see what was happening. I said, nope, we're going to do a good job. 80% is you keep moving forward, you get more done, and we feel accomplished at the end of our day, which makes us feel really good about ourselves. Versus if we're trying to strive for that extra 20 to make it 100, it creates an incredible amount of emotional stress. We're never good enough. We always could have done more, and we just end up beating ourselves up. Do you see the difference here? 80% makes me feel good about myself. Striving for perfectionism at 100%, I end up hating myself, beating myself up, and never being good enough. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer which one we would choose. So think of this too for those, we've all been in school. It's striving in a positive way for a B instead of going for an A, where a B is a good job, right? A B is a good job, but we're not giving that unneeded and unnecessary 20% extra effort to strive for the A in life. Right? We have to stop striving for an A in life. We have to realize that a B is actually the best way to go in a sustainable and healthy life with a healthy emotional state. And what does it look like to go for 80%, right? To be a B. It's that it makes life fun again. It makes life fun again because take a second and sit back and think about, I can think how much being a perfectionist sucks the fun and the joy and the spontaneity and the creativity out of our lives. Right? I know I wanted to think that it made me better, that it brought me the spotlight and it, got me attention, but it didn't at all. It made life absolutely no fun because that bar could never be hit. I was never satisfied. So going for a B, life's fun again. It takes the unnecessary pressure that we put on ourselves. We do this to ourselves, ladies. It takes the unnecessary pressure that we put on ourselves off. It's like a huge concrete blocks get lifted off when we realize that a B is good enough, that we are enough, giving 80%, not as perfectionists at 100. And we've talked about this, we get more done. We get more done because I never really stopped to slow down to think that as I was hyper-focused on, let's say, this work project or essay when I was in school or grad school, what happened to the other, really more important things in my life? They all fell apart. I avoided them. I didn't do them. Things clog up, and then we start to feel really bad about ourselves and behind, and it's incredibly paralyzing. So when we go for a B, when we go for 80%, we really get to let go of the chronic emotional stress that is created by never getting enough done and that lifetime of beating ourselves up and the unnecessary stress and pressure that we put on ourselves when we choose to try to do life as perfectionists, right? And the beautiful thing is, living life from the 80% lens, we finally get to let the air out of that emotional pressure cooker, that emotional instant pot on high that lives all the time inside of us. We get to release that air. Our emotional state re-regulates and it supports our emotional health and well-being. And what that does is it supports our health in a way that if we live by the 80%, we're not going to have to worry about getting a chronic illness, right? Or an autoimmune disease or another kind of chronic disease. Or if we have already gone down that route, we will know how to keep our emotional state in check so we don't get more flare-ups and more diseases down the road. So today, for all the perfectionists out there, especially women, and I'm speaking to myself as well, I give us permission. We need to live from the 80% lens. And I want you out there to give yourself permission to live from the 80% because your health and your well-being depends on it. And please know you're worth it. Thank you. And so if you're out there, especially as women, and I know I've met men who are perfectionists too, so I'm also speaking to you men. If you're out there and you know you are a perfectionist and you have an autoimmune disease, you have a chronic illness, please know they're coming from your emotional state that's created by how we live life. And we need to learn to live life a new way. So if you're out there and you're ready to heal, and you're ready to be emotionally healthy, and you're ready for that immune system to re-regulate again, and you to fully heal, not be in remission, please know I have 2 online self-guided 13-week educational programs. I have the autoimmune healing program and the chronic illness healing program. Both of these programs get to the true root cause of our autoimmune disease or chronic illness, which is singularly our emotional state. We resolve that emotional overwhelm that's causing that chronically activated fight or flight in all of our conditions and symptoms. You get out of fight or flight, your immune system re-regulates, and you heal. And that process of getting out of chronically activated fight or flight happens in 13 weeks, and it happens without any need for supplements or medication or food diets. It's all education, a new way, a new lens of looking through life. And if this is a pathway you are curious about for yourself or a loved one, there is a link down below in the description to apply for a complimentary course consultation with me. Please know I would love to meet you. This is my passion, taking people down the same path of permanent healing that I have gone through, that I live. And if you're not ready to take that step, or you just want to learn a little bit more, down below, I have a link. Watch my 101, it's free, course on autoimmune diseases and chronic illnesses. I'm going to share with you all the things that your doctors won't tell you if you have an autoimmune disease or a chronic illness. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Oh, thanks. Just going to shout out here to Brooke. Thank you so much for watching today and for supporting my channel. And Salty, Karen and I are huge fans. He's a huge support of both myself and my teammate Karen Seitz' channel, Happy Wife School. I want to give you a shout out to Salty. Thanks for being here. We appreciate you as well. And you too, Brooke. Thanks for all your positive feedback on my channel. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. And again, I will see you next time.